Yes, good morning. How you doing? Yeah, a little bit of less volume there. A little less volume. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday View. How are you? It's exactly 11 a.m. on Sunday, December 16th, 2018. My name is Richie Allen, by the way. Hope you've had a good weekend. Very cold weekend. It's been a bit milder today, this morning, though. Very wintry. Beautiful outside. Really beautiful wintry scene here in South Manchester. Going to look at the front pages of the newspapers as usual and some of the stories inside. You can participate as usual by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. Welcome to Sunday View.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Yes, indeed. I did already give you the Twitter handle. It would be nice to hear from you this Sunday. Please get in touch with the programme. It's going to be an interesting hour, I think. Plenty of stuff to get through, so let's just do it.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes, multiple platforms around the world. Multiple platforms. We're on Fab Radio 2 here in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv, TuneIn Radio, richieallen.co.uk. And there are multiple podcast websites who take the programme and broadcast it, and that's fine by me as well. Alrighty, you well? Right. There is quite a bit to get through. Sunday View, some of our listeners are beginning to treat Sunday View with a bit of suspicion. They think it's Brexit Central these days. It isn't. I've been good in the last few weeks, particularly. There is a little bit of Brexit stuff to get through. I promise you it's interesting, and I promise you that it won't go on forever, right? You got to trust me. It won't go on forever. A little bit of Brexit stuff to get through. But before I do that, I want to say good morning to Anna in Utah, in Mormon country. Anna, good morning. And I hope you're well. I had a lovely message from your fella, Chris, who got in touch with me through the website. And he said that you listened regularly and that he asked me to give you a shout this morning. Apparently Anna in Utah got her fella Chris to listen to the programme. I don't know if he's a reluctant listener, Chris, but he listens. He doesn't have any choice. So I'm glad to say, Anna, good morning. And Merry Christmas to you, Chris, and your families. Here's something I've never done, by the way. Yeah, it's very early in the AM there in Utah Central Time, so good morning to Anna. And our listeners overseas, late or early, welcome to Sunday View. Front pages of the Sunday newspapers are next. Good morning! 25 degrees, my arse, eh? It ain't 25 degrees here. Let's get rid of that then. Right, we're going to look at the papers straight away. We'll start with the Sunday Observer this morning. Why not? The Sunday Observer. Little bit of Brexit stuff. Let's get it out of the way. But I promise you, it's not as dull as it often is. We're reaching the zenith now. We're reaching the cold face now of this madness that is Brexit. The Sunday Observer's headline is Brexit deadlock is blocking off vital domestic policy reforms. So you can guess what that means. That an unnatural focus on Brexit has put other issues on the back burner, and things are not moving forward domestically on a number of issues, allegedly. Also on the front page of The Observer, senior Tories urge free vote on second referendum. What does that mean? Senior Tories urge a free vote on second referendum. Now, this makes a lot of the Sunday newspapers today. These reports that Conservative Party ministers are appealing for a second referendum on Brexit. So it's on a lot of the papers today, on a lot of the front pages, I should say, inside the papers, I should say. The Sunday Observer says the Prime Minister is being urged to give MPs free rein to vote for another public ballot. It also reports that a cross-party group of MPs has warned Theresa May that Brexit is sucking the life out of her government and blocking domestic policy reforms, which I mentioned already. That same approach is taken by the Sunday Times. The headline on the Sunday Times front page is PM's team plots new referendum. Really? Two of Theresa May's most senior allies are preparing for a second EU referendum behind her back. Behind her back, according to the Sunday Times. This will open up a whole new Tory civil war. David Lidington, who's Theresa May's number 2 in all but name, held talks with Labour MPs last Thursday in an effort to build a cross-party coalition for a new vote. This is in the wake of the Theresa May's humiliation at the hands of MPs and also European Union leaders. They named 2 people. They named Lidington and they named Gavin Barwell, who's Theresa May's chief of staff. And apparently he told a cabinet minister last week that holding a second referendum was the only way forward. Let's hear from Anushka Astana. It's either Anushka Astana or Anushka Astana. She writes for The Guardian anyway. You know who she is. She was on the BBC Mar show today. She tried to make sense of this story. Are Tory ministers paving the way or trying to pave the way for a second referendum? Here's Anushka Astana on the BBC earlier.
Proponents of a People's Vote are going to get very, very excited by this headline, this idea that the PM's team are plotting a new referendum. And I'm sure some of your guests will be suggesting it's not true. So let me just tell you what's in the story. I mean, it's Tim Shipman, who's political editor of the Sunday Times, very, very well connected. And the figures that he's talking about are extremely senior. We're talking about the Prime Minister's de facto deputy, David Lidington, apparently talking to Labour MPs about ideas including a second referendum.
And he's not a wild man, David Lidington. He's meant to be the kind of sober, sensible centre of the cabinet, as it were.
Certainly not wild, although I imagine a proponent of a soft Brexit, shall we say. So clearly he will have been having these conversations with Labour MPs, including some of those who really want a second referendum. And Gavin Barwell, who's her chief of staff, who apparently
however,
told...
this morning, because we can now see his tweet.
He has tweeted. So apparently he told a cabinet member that he wanted a second referendum. Actually...
I do not want a second referendum, he says.
He doesn't, and he also goes on to say he's actually going to play football with his kids. But, you know, he doesn't want one. That doesn't mean there aren't any conversations about having one. And this even suggests that David Cameron had a conversation with the Prime Minister where she said, I don't want a second referendum, but I am a servant of the Commons. I mean, what we know is happening is that there are loads of conversations going on about how they can possibly get something through the Commons, and that is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, so the Tories want a second referendum now. This is getting so ridiculous, my dear friend, that Saturday Night Live is lampooning this madness, and apparently Matt Damon of Good Will Hunting fame and The Bourne Identity fame and Ocean's 11 fame and all the rest of it, apparently he's been playing David Cameron on Saturday Night Live. It's a joke, isn't it? What a joke. Hey, there's a good bit of scaremongering on the front page of the Sunday Times as well, because there's a story, dear listener, that reads, no deal Brexit travel warning, don't go on holiday after March 29th. Fuck! I booked my holiday. I actually didn't. We don't book holidays in the future, Mrs. Allen and I. We just go with the flow. Last minute deals are our thing, really. No deal Brexit travel warning, don't go on holiday after March 29th. At this level of crap. I mean, this is not just crap, this is septic tank. This is septic tank, this, isn't it? It really is. What's going to happen after March 29th? Are planes going to drop out of the sky? Is the English Channel going to turn into acid and sink all the boats that might be travelling towards France? This is bollocks, isn't it? We even learned that the worst thing the European Union has proposed is that we pay £6 every 4 years to give us 90-day little trips to Europe when we want to go on little trips to Europe. It's rubbish. Apparently these are contingency plans that have been drawn up, and the contingency plans will be released at some stage in the very early new year, and they will tell people, look, to be on the safe side now, don't plan on going on holiday after March 29th. What's going on here is this is to terrify people about no deal. You see, one of the great desires, one of the great plans of the hidden hand was to make the spectre of a no deal, which means just leave in the European Union full stop, with no deals on anything, which is a great thing to do, by the way. It's a great thing. I've explained a million times, so I won't bore you again. Just walk out. Listen, we're gone, right? Good luck to you. All the best to you now. We will put these tariffs... No, you fucking won't. Don't start with that. because we've got more aces than you have. That's the way it would work with a no deal. So they wanted to terrify people about no deal. And these stories about don't go on holiday after March 29th are designed to encourage the great unwashed. Now, the great unwashed, dear listener, is me and you. We're the great unwashed. And these stories are designed to make us tell our MPs, don't fucking leave without a deal. We're not having it. When leaving without a deal should have been done 2 years ago. Right, anyway, that's the sort of scaremongering that's going on. On this Sunday Telegraph, though, contrarily, there's a different story on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, which is a Brexit supporting paper. Don't worry, we're nearly done with Brexit. Hunt, UK will flourish without a Brexit deal. This is Jeremy Hunt, the UK Foreign Secretary. Politics is great, isn't it, dear listener, eh? You balls up the health service, eh? Eh? There are trolleys outside Tesco's now with patients on them, 5 miles away from the nearest accident and emergency. That's how bad it is, right? I was in the post office Friday morning. Honest to God, I was in the post office near Hart Road in South Manchester. Why? Because there's no other post office near me. They're closing them all down. This is privatisation for you. I had to go miles away for a post office, right? And there's an old man in front of me, lovely old man. And he started talking to me because that's the thing that older people do. They're not glued to their fucking phones. Old people are not looking at their phones like fucking zombies. They actually say, how do? I'm all right, sir. Yeah, how are you? I'm all right. What happened to your arm? I fell going down the stairs. I'm 81, you know. And the cliched answer is, you look well for 81, but he did look well for 81. He said, I said, where did you go? The Royal Infirmary? He said, yeah, I went to the Royal Infirmary. And your arm was broken? It was. Did you know it was broken then? No. But I was in agony, he said. The x-ray said it was broken, so they put a cast on me. How long were you there waiting before you were seen? And I said, before you answer me, the target is 4 hours, no more than 4 hours. How long were you there? He said it was really busy. I was there for 7 hours. 7 hours, eh? Marvellous! That's a working day, minus your breaks. Sitting there. So Jeremy Hunt fucked up the health service, and his reward for that was the best job in government, where you get to fly all over the world, getting pissed, smoking cigars, and telling fucking lies. So anyway, that was a bit of a segue there. Jeremy Hunt says that we will flourish without a Brexit deal. I don't know where he said that from. He might have been in the Bahamas. For all I know. The wonderful thing about being Foreign Secretary. Hunt's words are likely to be welcomed by Leavers, says the Sunday Telegraph. Tell us something we don't know. Blah, 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 blah. Here's Labour's Kate Hoey. We're nearly at the end of the Brexit report, dear listener. We're nearly there. Hold your breath. Labour's Kate Hoey, committed Brexiteer. She used to be the Culture and Sport Secretary under Blair, wasn't she? She was at one time. She's a committed leaver, and she has been saying that we should leave without a deal and extolling the benefits. So she's been explaining in a very detailed way why we should leave with no deal. Here is Kate Hoey.
Well, I think we get confused with this word deal. I mean, we're leaving, we should be leaving, and then we have the discussion about the kind of option. I mean, Canada plus, all this idea would be very, very good. But in the meantime, to get out without paying the £39 billion, we could leave. And, you know, there's been all this talk about how catastrophic it would be to leave without a deal. I don't actually think so. And a lot of economists have been saying that it wouldn't be, and we could do it. And it also sends a message to the EU now that, you know, we're not prepared to put up with a deal, which in the end they're trying to give us, which is keeping us actually in the EU. It's a half in, half out. It really is. And then to be paying £39 billion for what? You know, I just don't think the public understand that. Even some Remain people who I know very, very well have said to me they can't understand how the Prime Minister could have possibly thought that this could go through, especially with the Irish backstop and all of the issues that that's raising.
Good stuff from Kate Hoey. Why wouldn't you leave, dear listener? Come on. And you know, it is nice to know that some of my listeners totally disagree with me on stuff. That's good, that, you know. It's good, it's healthy. I have no problem with that. And I do get the odd mail from people going, you are not qualified, Richie. You have no qualifications to talk about how leaving with no deal would be brilliant. You're talking through your arse. I get that quite a bit. Maybe I do occasionally talk through my arse. And of course I do. We all do, don't we? But on the issue of the European Union and on the issue of economics and finance generally, I'm not talking through my sphincter. I know what I'm talking about. I know very well what I'm talking about. You say to the European Union, listen, we're gone. Goodbye. Forget it. No negotiations. No 39 billion. They say, right, well, we're going to impose tariffs. You say, listen, don't listen to me, Mr. Juncker. Go and speak to the heads of the automotive industries in France and Germany and Spain. Just those 3 countries. And tell those people that you're planning on sticking tariffs on our goods. Good luck to you, Mr. Juncker. You might not get out alive. I would inform some people of your whereabouts before you tell the heads of BMW, Audi, Volkswagen and Mercedes that you're planning on risking billions of pounds worth of their business in England by slapping tariffs on us. You won't do that, you drunk fucker. We will leave and things will carry on as normal. End of story. And that's how it should work. Now, Tony, the mass murdering turd Blair, has been on Sky over the weekend talking to Beth Rigby. I've said before, I like Beth Rigby. She's a good woman, a good journalist, old school hack. Watch the clip on YouTube if you can, on Sky's channel, on Sky's YouTube channel. Why, Richie, you ask? Because Beth looks genuinely repulsed to be in the same room as Tony Blair. Honestly. I know you would say, well, why wouldn't you, Richie? But she looks absolutely aghast when she's looking at him. Such a sick, mass-murdering psychopath Blair is. Anyway, they keep rolling Blair out to put forward this, let's have a second referendum. And we are going to have a second referendum, if not a general election. Here's Blair himself on Sky yesterday.
We've had 30 months of negotiation. There is no real consensus as to what form of Brexit people want. And the deal that the Prime Minister's finally concluded with Europe is a deal that no one really wants. So I think the logical thing is to go back to the people and say, you're going to have to give us direction because Parliament can't agree on what form of Brexit. And it's clear that as a result of this negotiation, our knowledge of what Brexit really means has been vastly enlarged. I think the odd thing with the decision of this magnitude is not once you go through the process of negotiation to go back at the end and have a final think about it.
Yeah. Our understanding of what Brexit is has been enlarged, says Blair. Yes, it has. That the European Union is a fascist dictatorship, the most undemocratic union on planet Earth. Look what happens when you try to walk away from it. Look what happens when you try to walk away from it, but being nice to them and saying, look, we're leaving to do our own thing, but we'd still like to have a good trading relationship with you. Look what happens to you. Look what they've done, the way they've behaved. Of course, it's enlarged the understanding of people. I think most people, or more, not most, but more people are aware of what the European Union actually is. Now, I would argue. Hey, listen, let's stay with the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, because there's a brilliant story on there about spying on children through webcams. We're just about done with Brexit, you'll be happy to know. Not bad. 20 minutes past 11. Not bad, I hear you say, Richie. Not bad at all, eh? Not bad. We'll hear from wee Jimmy Cranky in a minute, otherwise known these days as Nicola Sturgeon. But not really about Brexit, more about Scottish independence. We'll hear from wee Jimmy Cranky in a few minutes' time. But this is good. It's on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. And I think this story has made national news over the weekend. The headline is, schools being spied on with webcams. Schools being spied on with webcams. I know this won't surprise some of our listeners, but remember, we don't know everything. We might think we do, but we don't. And there are people joining programs like this all the time for the first time. So let's be open-minded here. Let's be fair to people who this information might be new for them, right? Listen to this. Tens of thousands of pupils as young as 5 are at risk of being spied on through their webcams, which uses software designed to tackle extremism in schools. Wow. It's called classroom management software, and it's used by schools across the UK to flag up when words linked with terrorism, cyberbullying and self-harm are typed on laptops and tablets. However, an investigation by the Sunday Telegraph has found that one major provider of the software is able to remotely enable webcams on devices to spy on pupils, often without students or their parents ever knowing about it. Who is this company? What is this company? It's called Net Support DNA, and it provides software to more than 1,000 schools, and said that the camera on a laptop is enabled if a student types in words such as bomb or suicide. Have a listen to this again, dear listener, in case you missed it. Net Support DNA provides software to more than 1,000 schools. Net Support DNA admitted that it enables remotely the camera on a laptop if the student types in words such as bomb or suicide. What happens then, dear listener? Well, a screenshot or recording of the student is captured and sent to a teacher to flag that they are a risk. In some cases, details of the student are also sent to the police. Yeah. Net Support DNA would not reveal how many webcam images and videos of students are taken each day. They just wouldn't say. Hey, listen, so you're remotely turning on the webcams when little Mary or little Johnny is typing and might innocently use the word bomb as part of an essay about World War II, maybe, and you take a photograph of them, you record some stuff and you send it to the teacher or the police. How many times have you done that? We're not telling you. We're not telling you. Defend Digital Me is a campaign group against this sort of thing, and Jen Person, who's a mother of 3 herself and is the director of Defend Digital Me, she said the parents don't know this software exists. It's a huge red flag that companies are so unwilling to speak openly about how the systems work, and that there is no documentation about what parents should be told. Isn't that extraordinary, eh? It won't be a big surprise to you, probably, to some of you anyway. It's no big surprise to me. There will be listeners listening to this who will say, Richie, do you think it's just students, do you? It's people at work, Richie. It's probably us. I'm sure it is us. I'm sure it is us. If you've got a computer or a laptop and it has a camera on it, because all smartphones and all tablets do, of course it is very easy for people with the nous, to the wherewithal. It's very easy for them to access it. That's old technology. Now, I'm not worried too much about sitting around worrying about, somebody switching on my camera. It's obviously very wrong. It's very sinister. It's very dangerous. I don't want it to be happening, but I don't get too wound up about it because I just assume that they've been doing it forever and a day. When they turn my webcam on, if they do, whoever they is, it's not very interesting. It's just me typing stuff or me downloading stories, me surfing news websites. Generally what I do on my laptop. Interesting times. More on that sort of thing in a few minutes. Hey, speaking of education and what's happening in schools, Sophie Ridge, who is Sky News' Sunday version of Andrew Marr, she presents a programme called Ridge on Sunday, which is 9 a.m. every Sunday morning. She had the Education Secretary Damien Hines on. The Education Secretary Damien Hines. Again, for listeners overseas, the terminology Education Secretary basically means he is the man responsible for overseeing education in the UK. Okay? Basically. Funding it and many other things as well. So he was on Sophie Ridge this morning, and Sophie Ridge asked him an excellent question about education. You don't often get excellent questions from reporters or presenters on Sky News or anywhere else for that matter. But Sophie's question to the Education Secretary was excellent. Let's have a listen to it.
I'm keen to ask you as well about whether there is a wider issue in schools because of the, one-size-fits-all education policy. I mean, we're talking about children with high needs. We know that there's, mental health pressures on our young people. Do you think in the past there's been too much of a focus on having all children, no matter what their personalities, no matter what their needs, focused on a very academic curriculum where you're expected to be sitting behind a desk for all these hours a day, right up to the age of 18? Is that failing our young people?
Well, we have a very good curriculum with balance in it and studying a wide variety of subjects. Like, by the way, schools in other countries as well. There is special provision, rightly, for children with special needs, and in some cases it's right for those children to be in special schools, though actually in very many cases it's right for them to be in mainstream schools. But, I want to see a broad and balanced curriculum with children being able to try different subjects, try different things, and also the balance with sport and extracurricular activities and so on. And that's absolutely what I'll continue to strive to do.
So has there been too much of a focus on exams, do you think?
She's good, eh? Two very good questions there. Is the focus too much on exams? What does the Education Secretary say to that?
Exams are important. I mean, they're important for lots of different reasons. I mean, one of the things is, it's a unique way of being able to set out what you've learned, to show what you can do, and that kind of. What comes with exams, there is some pressure that comes to them, but in some ways that's rather like what happens later in life, and so in some ways it's a good way to prepare you for later in life. But it's not only about exams. What we all want for our children is a broad and balanced education. We want them to discover the joy of learning, to be able later in life to come back to great literature and history that they've discovered, and we also want them to discover other talents that they have in practical things and in the arts and music and so on.
Don't believe him for a minute. Schools are indoctrination centres, and the reason schools have gravitated towards this relentless testing model, which is evident throughout the United Kingdom and Ireland, of course my own country. Exams, is not to gauge what the child has learned, it's more to gauge whether the programming even is sticking in the heads of the children. That's what it is. Schools are indoctrination centres. Maybe they always were, I don't know. I think my experience of primary school in the early days was positive. I'm thinking when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, before I began to the test school, my experience of it was pretty good. It wasn't constant testing. This target system that was introduced under the Blair government, during the Blair years. It's not about... school is not about learning, self-discovery, understanding your place in your family, understanding your place in your community, understanding who and what you are in the world, the spirituality of it, the wonder of the world and the universe and your place and what it is to be a person. School has got none of that. School is about indoctrination, test, brainwash, test, see if it's sticking in your head. And it might sound like an oversimplistic explanation of what schools are, but that's what schools have become. As I said, maybe schools were always like that, I don't know. Hey, Sophie Ridge was in top form today. She was on fire because a little bit later on she had wee Jimmy Cranky on. These days, of course, wee Jimmy goes by the name of Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister. And the reason I'm playing you this bit of audio is because the Scottish Independence Party, the SNPs, Scottish National Party, the SNPs, they want Scottish independence from Great Britain first and foremost. That's their raison d'etre, right? It's why they exist. And that's what they want. They want to leave the UK and leave Great Britain. That's number one priority for these Scottish nationalists. Sophie Ridge had a brilliant question for Nicola Sturgeon. Go on, Sophie. She had a good day today, Sophie.
Why is it that you're, obviously a supporter for Scottish independence? You're unhappy with Scotland being dictated to by Westminster, but you're happy to be a member of the EU, you're keen to be a member of the single market and the kind of rule-taking that involves. So why is it different by, the relationship with Brussels and that of Westminster?
Brilliant question. Of course, I've been saying this for years, fair enough, but to hear it out of the mouth or the mouths, but in this case the mouth of a mainstream television news presenter. Good stuff, Sophie. Anyway, what do we Jimmy Cranky say in response?
Well, I think that is, frankly, with the greatest respect, a really overly simplistic argument.
No, it fucking isn't a simplistic argument, you wee ginger. You want to gain independence from Great Britain because Scotland should be the master of its own destiny. But then you want to just give it to Brussels. That's what Sophie's excellent question was implying. So it's not oversimplistic, Jimmy.
The European Union is an organisation made up of independent countries. Nobody argues that France or Germany or Ireland are not independent countries. They come together, pooling sovereignty to help deal with and tackle some of the big challenges that no country can do alone in the modern world. Climate change, for example. Through the EU, the world's biggest single trading market has been created. And, you know, you only have to look at Ireland just now. Ireland's not being dictated to.
What did she just say there? She couldn't have said that.
It's not being dictated to. Ireland, in many ways, market has been created. And, you know, you only have to look at Ireland just.
What did she say about Ireland again?
Ireland's not being dictated to.
Ireland is not being dictated to. We'll get back to that.
Ireland, in many ways, is calling the shots. And
Ireland is calling the shots!
In the EU. So the power of small independent countries in the EU is there for all to see
the power
right now.
Of small independent countries is there for us all to see. Nicola Sturgeon is on hippie crack. She's on hippie crack. Greece, Ireland, Italy have been fucking destroyed by the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, otherwise known as the Troika. Sovereignty has been evaporated. These countries must get their domestic budgets signed off by the EU, Richie. It's worse. Germany. They've got to beg German permission to issue a fiscal budget for a parliamentary year. That is true. And we, Jimmy Cranky, with a straight face, said Ireland is independent and Ireland is calling the shots. Everything of any value in my country has been sold off to pay down a debt that the Irish people never took on for themselves. And while Sophie Ridge's question was brilliant, if only Sophie Ridge or some presenter would stop the likes of wee Jimmy Cranky and say, you fucking moron, are you honestly sitting here telling me today on national television that Ireland is an independent country? Are you shitting me, Jimmy? Where's Ian? That's dreadful, that. Independent, huh? Ireland is an independent country, huh? I've heard it all today, you know. I've heard it all. This is Sunday View. How are you? And my name is Richie Allen. It's great to be with you. 25 minutes to 12 for December the 16th, 2018. And there's still one or two newspaper front pages to look at. We'll look at the Mail on Sunday and the Sunday Express in a moment. Staying with Scotland, though, this is a wonderful segue. This is Wet, Wet, Wet and Sweet Little Mystery back in 3. This is Europe's most listened to independent radio show by a country mile. It is Sunday View with me, Richie Allen, live for a Sunday morning. Great to be with you. Thanks for listening. Cry, cry, cry. Don't ever sing along with the music, Richie. We'll fire the bejesus out of you. That was said to me once. Right, Gillian Sharp. Good morning, Gillian. It's beautiful, Richie. And the sun is shining in Morley in Yorkshire. How you doing, Gillian? Thanks for that. Warms my heart, that. Yorkshire, what a beautiful place. So many wonderful. In the north of England, it's grim down south, you see. It's grim down south. The north of England, we've got some wonderful places. Good morning to Ricky, to Liz. How you doing, Liz? To Gail, good morning, Gail. To Cypherdyne Systems, good morning, mate. Good morning to Denny C. How you doing, Denny? So many of these came in now and I'm scrolling back. Good morning, Jason. Richie, has anyone else noticed the clone-like similarity between Macron and Blair? Yes, mate. Absolutely right. Good morning to David. Why does Blair get airtime? How is he relevant? Asks David. Well, that's right, David. I mean, ask the producers of the Sunday morning breakfast news programmes. Why bring Blair on? Why indeed? You would imagine it's a negative thing, you know. Good morning to Dean Smith, to David Stanford. Speaking of post offices, Richie, says David, I have to travel 35 miles to go to my nearest bank branch. That's a £15 train journey and a £5.50 bus trip. That's a round trip. Yes, of course, David. And we've talked about this on this programme. It's one of the things that's being done. Rural areas are being downgraded as part of this Agenda 21, Agenda 30. Get people into super cities, get them away from the coasts, get them away from rural areas where they are thriving. People who live in the countryside, far healthier than people who don't. I'm really behind with the trips, with the tweets even. Paul Craven tweets, Richie, there's going to be some very posh people in hell, but it's all right. They seem to know each other. Dean tweets, is it me or does Tony Blair's voice make you a little sick in your mouth? Just a little bit. Good morning to Sean McDonald and to everybody else who's tweeting this morning. Feathers are us. Speaking of children typing stuff innocently and then being filmed by an external agency, Feathers are us tweets, you could just type bath bomb or something innocent like that. It's mad. Then you are being surveilled. Yes, that's right. It's the way it's meant to be. Good morning to Neema on Twitter. Good morning, Neema. Richie, my son is constantly tested. It's ridiculous. He goes back on January 3rd with more exams starting immediately. It's too much, and it really is systemic indoctrination. Fortunately, he's already a skeptic, tweets Neema. Thanks, Neema. And to echo your tweet, Samantha, long-time listener. How you doing, Samantha? Richie, my daughters are always having to do tests at school. My daughter got marked down in one of her science exams because they said it was the wrong answer. It was actually correct, but they have to put what they're being told, don't they? That's a brilliant point, Samantha. It's not about right or wrong. It's about what they want you to tell them back, what they want you to regurgitate. And there's been another 30 blooming tweets have come in the meantime. Thank you for them, by the way. So I'm behind, so I better crack on, right? Let's crack on. Speaking of climate change, before we get to climate change, there's no Brexit on the Mail on Sunday front page. The headline is bumper pay rises for BBC top brass. The Mail on Sunday is saying that BBC executives are paying themselves an extra 30% in their annual wage rises. They say that this won't go down well with licence payers. Of course it won't. But you've got to ask licence payers. Don't ask me. The Sunday Express tweets, fury as NHS ignores dads. This is a story about how NHS documents are replacing the word fathers in their antenatal guidelines with birthing partners. This is the sort of political correct story that we're seeing a lot of lately. NHS removing fathers in the antenatal guidelines with birthing partners. Lovely. Lovely. Speaking of more political correct madness and gender wars and all the rest of it, there's a very interesting story inside the Mail on Sunday today, dear listener. Do you want to hear the headline? The headline is, 8-year-old pupils to be told boys can have periods too under new sex education lessons guidelines. So you won't mind then, dear listener, if I take Wednesday off because I have a heavy period, because I can't cope with period pains and cramps. Where's Richie Allen tonight? He's got his period. Give him some cranberry juice. 8-year-old pupils to be told boys can have periods too under new sex education lessons guidelines. This is not a joke. I said this last week, didn't I? Sometimes people hear these stories on programmes like ours and they say, you're exaggerating it now. No. Sex education lessons in which pupils as young as 8 will be told all genders have periods were yesterday condemned as unnecessarily confusing for young children. The classes follow guidelines that were issued to teachers to help them avoid offending girls who identify as boys. So we don't want to offend girls who think they're boys, so let's just say that everybody can have a period. Wonderful. I'm not going to read any more. This is true. It's true. It's not bullshit. It's true. Because the newspaper has contacted all parties and have had responses from those who are pushing this agenda, who say it's good, we've got to be inclusive. We've got to be inclusive. And girls who pretend to be boys and boys who pretend to be girls. We can all have periods, all of us. Good. I could do it a few days off, to be honest. Jesus. That was Inside the Mail on Sunday. Right, Sky News and everybody else is running with a big climate change story today, because this climate conference in Katowice in Poland has finally come to an end. David Attenborough and all these people were speaking at it, telling us that we've only got a few years left before we're under 25 feet of water and we are starring in our own disaster movie. That's what they're telling us is going to happen in the future. This is Sky News Today. This is Stephen Dixon and Gillian Joseph.
Almost 200 countries have signed up to a new set of rules aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. At a meeting in Poland, it was agreed the 2015 Paris Climate Accord will be implemented.
Well, the agreement has been hailed a success by many, but critics say it's not ambitious enough to prevent the effects of global warming. As Lorna Shaddick reports.
It is so decided.
Nearly 200 countries and a celebration of the art of the possible. They've come up with a plan to put the 2015 Paris Climate Change Agreement into practice, aiming to keep global warming at less than 2 degrees.
The principles which were agreed by leaders in 2015 needed to be put into motion, needed to be operationalized, and this is what we achieved here in Katowice, in Poland.
Right, that guy was Michał Kurtyka. He was the kind of chairman of these talks. And he said that back in 2015, this Paris Accord, what we've achieved today, 3 years later, is we've agreed a consensus going forward. He's not actually telling the truth, but that doesn't matter. Have a listen.
In Poland, and I'm very proud and very happy.
He's proud and happy, but they haven't achieved anything. Listen.
Sir David Attenborough was just one of those who came here to warn of impending disaster if drastic carbon emissions cuts aren't made. Scientists predict climate catastrophe in just 12 years if we can't slash emissions by 45% by 2030.
Yeah, if we don't slash emissions by 45% by 2030, we're all dead. So a lot of hyperbole came from Katowice. Despite the grandstanding of people like Kurtyka, and despite the standing ovations, the United States and the European Union are not on board. So this is a non-starter anyway, thank God. Greenpeace is not best pleased, oh dear. Here's Jennifer, what's her name, this woman? Jennifer Morgan. She's the International Executive Director of Greenpeace, Jennifer Morgan.
The fossil fuel countries here slowed things down. I think that the United States certainly did not help on the issue of having science move forward. But there was just an overall lack of leadership from the European Union as well on getting ambition out of the agreement.
Yeah, ambition out of the agreement. She smokes about 90 cigarettes a day, Jennifer Morgan there from Greenpeace. So much bullshit here. Right? They're not going to bring emissions down by this level by 2030. They won't. And I can tell you, we won't be under 15 feet of water. And the world is not going to end as we know it. Communities are not going to collapse because of this. It is bullshit. The sun drives climate, not CO2 emissions. Not man's activity. The sun. And the sun, full stop. Not the newspaper. The sun. Celestial body, the star that burns brightly in the distance there. You can see it sometimes, not often in Manchester, but you can see it. It's the sun. Let's have a listen to a guy called Dr. Nir Shaviv. He's an Israeli-American physics professor. In fact, his field is astrophysics. Well, he's got a new field. It's astrophysics and climate science. This guy is based at the University of Jerusalem, and nobody's paying this guy. He's taken no money from anybody. His opinions are his own, right? Have a listen to him talking about the relativity or how relative the sun is in relation to our climate patterns. Listen carefully to this now. It is a bit highbrow, or at least I found it highbrow anyway. It's very scientific, but listen, and then we'll try and make sense of what it is he's saying.
I think the reason that you can find an astrophysicist working in climate change is because It turns out that climate is affected by things which are outside the atmosphere. The evidence is there that the sun has a large effect on climate, but it is mostly ignored. You can quantify the effect of the sun and see that it's very large, yet if you open, say, the last IPCC report, they won't mention it. They'll actually say that the sun has a minute effect on the climate. In particular, because the climate is affected by the sun and other things which are outside the solar system, you will find that you need, at least in order to understand those aspects, you need an astrophysicist. The standard IPCC view of the effects of the sun is that the sun affects the climate only through changes in the solar irradiance. These are just changes in the total solar output. But we know today that there must be another effect which links solar activity to climate. We can quantify it, we can see that it's much larger. The sun is not a constant star. It has variations on various timescales. Probably, I mean, most people heard of the 11-year solar cycle, which is a cycle of about 11 years, over which the polarity of the north and south magnetic poles switch. On longer timescales, there are secular variations which modulate it. Now, and then on very short timescales, you have things like coronal mass ejections, you have eruptions on the sun. Now, those things...
The poles shifting, you have eruptions, you have ejections, you have solar spots. The guy is a typical academic. He's probably fairly smart, not very good at explaining it, but he's talking about how not just the sun, but the universe itself, not just the sun, but everything that happens outside our atmosphere has an impact on changes in climate patterns on planet Earth. I listened to this several times this morning. It's very good. And with the accent and everything, ironically, he's talking about accents with his Irish accent. But you've got to listen to it. It's very good, this.
Things translate to variations in various things. For example, the total solar radiance changes by typically 0.1% over those 11-year solar cycle variations and over the longer modulation timescales. But in addition to the changes in the solar radiance, which are actually very small, about 0.1%, you have also variations in other components of the sun. You have changes in the magnetic fields. As I said, the magnetic field changes polarity. You have changes in the number of sunspots, which are associated with the magnetic field, because the sunspots are basically the footprints of where the magnetic field or magnetic field loops penetrate the solar surface. You have changes in the amount of UV, which are relatively large. You have changes in the X-rays. You have changes in the strength of the solar wind. We know that the sun has a solar wind because we can measure it, but we have known that for decades because you can see comets have tails which always stretch in the opposite direction of the sun because the solar wind blows away the tail from the...
Solar winds are very important, and the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, won't acknowledge the impact of solar winds on the surface of the Earth and how particles travelling through those solar winds interact with the Earth's atmosphere to change the weather and climate, right? This is good stuff. It really is. It's important, this.
The tail from the comets. We know that those particles, when they reach the Earth, they can penetrate the atmosphere. And because they are charged, the charged electrons, they cannot cross magnetic field, but instead they move along the magnetic field lines and they penetrate the atmospheres. And when they reach a typical height of about 100 kilometers, they collide with molecules in the atmosphere, they ionize them, and then...
They ionize molecules in the atmosphere.
And then when they recombine, we see the northern lights. So there are a lot of variations associated with solar activity, ranging from changes in the solar radiance to auroral activity, to changes in even the Earth's magnetic field, because it's affected by the solar winds.
Really good stuff. Now, that was a bit highbrow, even for us, even for you and me, and we like to pay attention to this stuff, bit highbrow. To sum up what he said there, he said that there is an enormous amount of shit going on the sun. An enormous amount of stuff. Between magnetic shifts of the star itself, between pole shifts, between sunspot activity, between solar flares, between solar winds. And all of that, and not just all of that, but other things happening in our solar system are affecting what happens on planet Earth. And he explained it, very academically there, very scientifically. It's excellent. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just refuses to accept this, even though astrophysicists, real climatologists, geologists have been saying this for years. To write climate models and say that we're changing, because of our activity, we are changing the climate of the Earth and it could be catastrophic for us. To say that and to ignore the sun is madness. Now, this Professor Shaviv of Jerusalem University, he was asked, why does the IPCC ignore this? Listen to his answer.
It would require the IPCC to significantly amend its picture. And
because they would have to amend their picture, and it gets better.
The net consequence would be that things are significantly less dire than what we're being told.
Things are significantly less dire than what we are being told, he said. Wow.
So people will naturally try to do their best to avoid this kind of evidence, which forces them to change their worldviews.
Yes, it's selective. It's selective intelligence gathering. It is selective cherry picking of facts to suit your agenda. That's what it is. Remember, one of the world's most renowned and peer-reviewed geologists, Professor Ian Plimer. Don't worry, it's not the whole thing. It's a very short snippet. This is Ian Plimer addressing Parliament about 6 years ago. Listen.
So we have from the geological evidence absolutely no evidence that carbon dioxide has driven climate. For some odd reason, the major driver of climate is that great ball of heat in the sky, which we call the sun. You heard it here first. It's really quite unusual. And we change our distance from the sun. Every 100,000 years our orbit changes from elliptical to circular. And we have a cycle of 90,000 years of cold and 10,000 years of warm. We're in one of those warm cycles now. And every 43,000 years the axis of the Earth changes a little bit. And every 21,000 years we get a bit of a wobble. Each of those orbital events put us further from the sun. Every now and then we get bombarded by cosmic rays coming from a supernova eruption somewhere out there. And if the sun's magnetic field cannot drive these away, we start to form low-level clouds. We've got extremely good evidence that this process has been going on for a very long period of time.
Millions and billions and trillions of years it's been going on. And when you get into arguments with your friends and family about climate change and global warming, remind your friends, your family, without falling out with them, don't fall out with them, that the IPCC models, the ones that the media uses to perpetuate this false narrative about climate change, the models are redundant intellectually because they don't factor in solar activity. It is insane. It is insane. And I'm going to leave you and love you this Sunday by reminding you there are some very sinister and very well hidden, at least well hidden from the eyes of most people on planet Earth, some very, very sinister and very well hidden reasons why they want people to believe this bullshit. And it has nothing to do with protecting the future of the Earth and the ecosystems of the Earth, and it is all to do with changing your behaviour and leading you blindly into this dystopian future where you cannot do anything that you want to do, that your personal freedom and sovereignty is completely eroded, because they can say you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, because it impacts negatively on planet Earth. It contributes to climate change. That's where we are. And that's where I take my leave of you this Sunday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the tweets. We will speak again tomorrow, Monday at 5 p.m. with the first of the week's Richie Allen shows. The last week before Christmas coming up this week. We're going to have some fun this week coming up. We'll tell you more about that tomorrow. Enjoy your Sunday. I love you, by the way. Speak tomorrow. Bye now.